fantasy friends, I'm Carrie Oehm from HotRoster today, and I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. And hey, there's a lot to be thankful for, things like sweatpants, but most importantly, all of the football we got to enjoy over the weekend. Just like we all love stuffing and mashed potatoes, there were plenty of players in Week 12 that we loved, and just like Aunt Betty's disgusting dessert, there were plenty of players who we weren't too fond over this past weekend. So I'm here to tell you who are the biggest winners and losers of Week 12. Just like I got the beans, greens, tomatoes, chickens, turkeys, you name it. Okay, so I honestly apologize for my singing attempt there, but someone who had a much better performance than I just did is Colin Kaepernick of the 49ers. The San Fran dual threat weapon completed 29 of 46 passes for 297 yards and 3 scores through the air, and he also jitterbugged for 113 yards on 10 attempts this past weekend against Miami. Despite San Fran's loss, his monstrous game was good enough for 33.1 fantasy points, a new regular season career high for the QB. And he did it against a pretty tough Dolphins D. To put this big day in perspective, this is just the 4th time a quarterback has run for over 100 yards and attempted for more than 40 passes. Also, just the 5th time someone has run for 100 plus yards and chucked for 275 or more. And this spike doesn't come out of nowhere either. Despite not making a start since week 6, Cap sits top 5 in rushing yards among QBs this season. He's also scored at least 19 fantasy points in his last 5 games. And his passing has been much better than I've expected this season. Looking ahead to Week 13 with the 49ers facing the Bears, I expect Cap to keep the good times rolling. He's my biggest winner this week, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see him on this list again next week. Remember when the Browns cut Taylor Gabriel? They must be kicking themselves right now. The 5'8" receiver had himself a day on Sunday, adding himself to my winner list. The Abilene Christian product posted 4 receptions for a team-high 75 yards and 2 TDs. Good for 22.2 fantasy points. And can we just take a moment and recognize this guy's explosiveness and speed? He was electric. Gabriel seriously looked like someone was controlling him on Xbox, weaving in and out of traffic for 35-yard scores. The Dirty Birds even trolled the Browns on Twitter after that play, just to rub in how good their former player is, which is absolutely hilarious. But this season hasn't been all smooth sailing for Gabriel. For the first 7 games this season, he only caught 8 passes for 107 yards and no scores. But over the last few weeks, Gabriel's playing time has increased, and he's definitely taking advantage of it. In his last 4 games, he's averaging 68 receiving yards, and this is also the 4th straight game he's totaled double-digit fantasy points. And he's also averaging 18 yards per catch this season. But there is a downside here. He's averaging less than 5 targets per game, and the guy is proving that he is the real deal, and he's efficient. That's why he made my winners list this week. But be cautious in season-long leagues. I'm not sure he'll continue this production. Well, I bet Drew Brees owners are grateful for more than just turkey. The vet still got it, chalking himself up a W on my winners list this week. Brees completed 28 of 36 passes for 310 yards and 4 scores, plus he added a 1-yard rushing TD by leaping into the end zone, tallying an exceptional 32.5 fantasy points. But this isn't anything new for the fantasy legend. This marks his 20th career contest of 30-plus fantasy points, extending his all-time record among quarterbacks. That also ties him for the most 30-point games at any skill position. That is just insane. And his banner day against the Rams was kind of unexpected, considering the Rams entered the game having allowed only 2 games of 15 or more fantasy points to any opposing QB. But that was no problem for Brees. He absolutely destroyed the Rams D. And with his performance, he joins some pretty elite company. With his 30 pass TDs this season, Brees joins Peyton Manning and Brett Favre for the most 30-plus TD seasons in NFL history, doing it 9 times, and it's only week 12. But this is normal for Hurricane Drew. I mean, he currently leads the NFL in passing yards, TD passes, and completion percentage. He's been a winner all season long, and he's definitely a winner this week. Plus, I see Brees having no problem shutting the Lions secondary in week 13 either. Come out, wherever you are. Brandon Cooks, where are you at? The Saints' wideout was nowhere to be found on Sunday in his team's big win over the Rams, on a day where the Saints scored 7 touchdowns and threw 37 pass attempts. Cooks didn't even record a target. That is honestly shocking. It's not often you see a team put up 49 points on the scoreboard, get a 32-point fantasy performance by their quarterback, and have its perceived #1 wide receiver get a big, fat 0. It was the first time in 37 career NFL games that he was shut out on the fantasy scoreboard. But don't panic, people. Before Week 12, Cooks has posted a touchdown or 66-plus yards in 5 of his previous 7 games. And over his 6 starts before the Rams came to town, Cooks had averaged 6 targets and 12.2 fantasy points per game. I mean, he's definitely a big loser this week, but keep in mind Mark Ingram and Tim Hightower combined for 29 touches, and Josh Hill and Kobe Fleener caught 10 receptions on 10 targets. So they really did take majority of the workload. I think Cooks bounces back next week against the Lions. Here we go again. 2 Jaguars wideouts had TDs on Sunday, and Allen Robinson was not one of them. Robinson's 2 fantasy points on 4 targets represented his 2nd worst single game score this season. And this happened on a day where his QB Blake Bortles actually had a decent fantasy day. Bortles scored 21 fantasy points, but were largely fueled by his career-high 81 rushing yards and his 13 completions for 126 passing yards. This made it pretty clear that Robinson was going to struggle. And just like your mashed potato gravy volcano, I expect this gravy struggle to overflow into Week 13. The Jags face the Denver Broncos next, which is like kind of trying to avoid Aunt Betty at family functions. It's a hard thing to do. The Broncos D is a literal wall, which is never a good matchup for a wideout. Robinson is a definite loser this week. It was definitely not Miller time in Week 12. Lamar Miller, welcome to my loser list. Now, his up and down season might be influenced by his own injuries. He's been dealing with a left ankle injury for several weeks now, and he did limp off the field late in the game on Sunday. But he was bottled up for the majority of his game, gaining just 57 yards on 19 carries and 18 yards on 3 catches. He also lost a fumble and was stopped at the 1-inch line in the first half. But he's playing under Brock Osweiler, which is unfortunate to say the least. I'll take one positive from his performance, though. His owners on Twitter made me laugh with all of their alarming panic memes. Miller's 4-point fantasy week is just brutal. It's actually his 2nd worst individual score of 2016 and his worst in 17 career games in which he had at least 20 touches. So fantasy owners, be wary of this guy moving forward. He is definitely a loser this week. Well, that's it for today, fantasy football friends. Make sure you check in again tomorrow when we look ahead to the quarterback situation in Week 13. And for those of you who don't know what HotRoster is, go to HotRoster.com, check it out, download the app, and give it a try. It's like no other fantasy game you've ever played. Then for some help winning the game, check out HotRoster today with the Raging Redhead Cam Stewart and Gary and Thorne every weekday at 4:30 Eastern only on the Fantasy Sports Network. For HotRoster now, I'm Carrie Oehm.